today on the Online for Authors podcast, I'm chatting with William R. Douglas, author of The Sum of All Our Anger, Civil War 2.0. Welcome, William.
Thank you, Terry. It's an honor to be on your show and have a good discussion. I look forward to the dialogue. So thanks for having me on.
Yes, it was an incredible book. I have a lot of thoughts on it, but before we delve into much, why don't you give people just a quick overview of what they're going to find when they open up the cover?
Sure. What they're going to find is a story that starts in 2061 after the election of the first openly socialist president. And his election sparks a sequence of events that culminates in a second civil war in America. Obviously, part of the storyline is taking our current political divisions and the acrimony, the anger that we have in this country, and painting a scenario of what could happen if this trajectory that we're on is left unchecked for the next 40 years.
Absolutely, it's kind of like a worst case scenario.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So where did this idea come from? Normally, like at least for me, I'll be doing something and an idea will spark. Was there a moment where you said, this is what I need to write?
Yeah, actually, it was born out of my first book, The Death and Resurrection of Baseball. Echoes from a distant past. That story takes place in 2166. Far in the future, the sport of baseball has been dead for over 100 years, and there are many factors leading to its demise, but the final proverbial nail in the coffin event was a second civil war in America. It was a plot device when I wrote the story, and but there's also a strong undercurrent of the war's aftermath that's in that first book. And when I was on numerous podcasts, I had several hosts challenge me about, are you going to write about the Civil War that's in this book? Because it sounds pretty intense. And I have to say I was very reluctant at the first suggestion, because obviously writing about such a horrific event that I pray never happens is not going to be a pleasant experience. But as time went on, and as the headlines continued to just relentlessly challenge all Americans with all the stuff that was going on in our country, I realized that, I have to write this book, even though I don't want to. And so that was the nexus of it all.
I've never had a book that I didn't want to write, but I have had scenes I didn't want to write. So I know that feeling of just like, oh, that's not what I want to do, but it's what's needed. So,
sure.
So in my review of your book, I stated that the book was amazing, horrifying, thought-provoking, disturbing, anxiety-producing, and a must-read. Like all of those things.
Yeah, that was powerful.
What kind of input are you getting from readers?
Pretty much the same as what you suggested. So there's been a couple of detractors, saying it was,
Don't we always get those?
Yeah. What are you gonna do? But the vast majority of the readers are using words that you have used to describe what they've just read.
Right. It's an excellent book. It is well written. It had me from the get-go. I was definitely involved. And at the same time, because of the subject matter, because of the idea of a second civil war and what that would look like in today's world, a civil war back when we had it in the 1800s would be a very different civil war than today's civil war, where we have weapons of mass destruction and when we have the communication systems that we have, and when everything that we do is linked through computers and the internet and electricity and all of the things, right? Yeah. So it's such a different thing that I would often find myself putting the book down. Like, have to take a little breather. I was so involved that I wanted to keep reading, but my mind was just like, I can't do more. I need a
Sure.
little break. Let's
Sure.
read a comic strip. Let's do something to. And so I found it to be very, very realistic. It's
Yeah.
40 years in the future, which I don't think is so far in the future as to not be able to have some inkling as
Yeah.
to what might transpire in a war
Sure.
like that. So,
Sure.
yeah, it was. Go ahead.
I use some literary poetry there because also I'm a history buff. And so the Second Civil War starts exactly 200 years to the day. That's the start of the First Civil War.
Right.
That was a nod to my, I have two big interests in history, the Second World War and the Civil War. So that was a nod.
You and my son should get together. I think that he knows every battle from the Civil War, and he's huge into World War II as well. So I think you two would probably never stop talking, because he hardly stops talking as it is. So, so I'm curious, what character in this book did you enjoy writing the most?
Probably Bishop King. And also Governor Mary Whitfield of Oklahoma.
Okay, so tell me why. What about those characters made you just enjoy what you were reading?
Yeah, so Bishop King, I think, embodies the idea that governing from the center has always been a part of our national heritage, right?
Right.
I think when the pendulum goes too far in one direction, the electorate tends to bring the pendulum back towards the center. And it doesn't matter if the pendulum is going left or right, that swing of the pendulum is going to come back more towards the center. So Bishop King is a moderate, and he's caught in the crossfire of both ideologies that have ignited this war. You have this extreme left ideology that has swept over most of the country on the coast, but not in the middle. And then you have the conservative ideology that remains a bedrock of support and pretty much the center of the country. And so he's stuck in the middle. He has a son that's ultra leftist, and as events unfold, Bishop King's loyalties come under a huge test.
Yeah.
And central to the theme of the story too is the idea of our Constitution and where we stand on it individually and as a nation. Are we willing to stand and support and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic? And the domestic part is obviously a huge theme in the story. Okay, you have a domestic threat to the existence of the Constitution. What are you prepared to sacrifice in order to rescue it and keep it alive? So yeah, and then Mary Whitfield obviously embodies the fight to preserve and protect and defend the Constitution. And so she leads obviously one side in the struggle.
You're right.
And and it just takes off from there. So
yeah, it was, like I said, a very good book, very strong characters. So we talked about the one that was the best to write. Did you have a character that was difficult to write, that was difficult maybe to see their point of view or to understand their motivations?
Yeah, that would be the president, Devin Cyrus. It's no secret, obviously, that there is a growing interest in socialism in our country, particularly on the college campuses, particularly in extremely blue areas of the electorate. And this fascination with socialism, I think, contains within it a proverbial Trojan horse. And that's a big premise in the story. But the character Devin Cyrus really is a compilation of that current interest from various characters currently in the news.
Right.
And also, it's a, how would I say it? It's an extrapolation of that instance to what, to 4 years in the future, what a socialist candidate
Might look like, or
might look like and
right.
might support. So,
Right.
yeah.
Right.
So in that regard, yeah, it was difficult because the character is, basically the polar opposite of what I consider myself to be. And so it was difficult to write in that character. And also some of the things he says and does. I mean, there's some truth to some of the stuff he says, and particularly in his inaugural address, because there's that wrestling match that all Americans have to deal with when it comes to issues of justice and equality, right, and so on and so forth.
Right. Exactly.
So, yeah. So, but yeah.
Well, and I think that goes back to your point of we tend to swing back to the middle.
Yeah.
Is that there is truth on both edges.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's a matter of taking that truth and then bringing it back to the center where we can do something with it.
Yeah. Correct.
Because you take either the right or the left too far, and then you end up with problems.
Right.
And if you can bring it back to the center, then you can find a way to use it that makes sense, because there are definitely socialist type programs that make sense and that appeal to the human kindness and the wanting to take care of and to protect and other things. And then there are also on the other side the idea of like the freedoms that we have and the freedoms of speech and the freedom to do as we want and all of those things that can also go too far. And you have to just be careful and bring them back to the center. And this book very much shows what happens when there isn't a middle anymore.
Correct. Yeah.
Right. Which is a little scary, because sometimes when I'm, if you listen to the news, there's not a middle right now. Doesn't feel like there. I think there still is. My husband and I rode across the United States on a tandem bicycle.
I saw that. Yeah.
Yeah. We did that in 2020, and that was like a big political unrest summer. And a lot of people told us we shouldn't go. And what we found instead of the contention was a lot of very nice, wonderful, giving people of all persuasions.
Yes.
Right. And so I think that the middle exists. I sometimes feel like the news doesn't let the middle exist, because the news plays better on an edge.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. So you have both sides, that are represented in the media, of course.
Right.
They want to appeal to their audience, and their audience is gravitating towards one side or the other, based upon the network name.
Exactly.
And I think that when we dialogues, particularly on these news shows, one thing that aggravates me is it doesn't matter which side it is, but it's aggravating the propensity to just shout people down.
Yeah.
They ask a question, and then there's this shouting match. And it's hard to discern who's saying what,
Exactly.
I wish people would just stop and listen. If you're going to ask a question, stop and listen. You might not like the answer, but at least stop.
Right.
And listen.
Right. And I've said that before too, about the idea that, there is no harm in hearing what someone else has to say.
Yeah.
Right. Like, listen, first of all, you may learn something.
Yeah.
You may learn something that helps you change what you believe, or solidify what you believe, or temper what you believe a little bit.
Yeah.
But listening to someone all the way through doesn't mean that you've changed your mind. It means that you have the ability to listen. And I think that we've lost that. I was telling my kids, I remember a time, I'm 61. I remember growing up, you'd watch the news, they would give you facts, and then my parents would debate it at the table.
Yeah.
And that's how they did it. And now I think with the 24-hour news cycle, what you get is is everybody debates it all the time from every angle, and they develop these talking points that then get picked up by other places, that becomes, and then you've stopped listening now, and you've also stopped thinking for yourself. You don't need to think for yourself. They tell you everything you need to know right there on the news.
Yeah, that's another dangerous point, that if you think that 40 years in the future, what does that look like? Because
exactly,
people forget how to use critical thinking skills, how to analyze things, how to be very careful, especially stuff on social media. It's like, oh, there's a post saying blah, 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 therefore I believe it, or therefore I disbelieve it. Well, the proper course would be, well,
let me look that up and see what I can find.
First of all, what's the source of this? And then second of all, what does further research reveal? I got stung more than a few times in my social media life by not checking facts and sharing out. So I don't even do it anymore. I have to have a post that has bibliography that backs up,
let you know where they got it and why.
Exactly. So without the bibliography, I just don't share stuff anymore. If it's something that really interests me, I'll ask the poster, hey, what's the bibliography behind this?
Yeah, where did you get this info?
I can share it. Sometimes I get it, sometimes I don't. So whatever.
Right. I think that AI actually plays a role in this that isn't really explored much in your book, but the idea that AI now can produce things that seem very real. Just over the weekend, there was an article by a major newspaper that gave the 25 best summer reads, and none of the books are real.
Huh.
They're book title names and their author names, and these authors either don't exist or didn't write that book.
Wow.
And so that gets a little scary when we think about this idea of critical thinking, because when you look at a newspaper and you read an article, you want to believe that at least the facts part would be true. Now, whether or not they have a bent one way or the other, you can discern that, but you want to believe that the facts are true. And yet here was one where an article was written this didn't hurt anyone. This was just a horrible blunder on their part. But the fact is that it could have hurt someone. Yeah. This could have been an article on something else. And then people would have taken to believe that. And that's a real shame. Yeah. So other than a good story, which this is, what do you want readers to walk away with when they have finished The Sum of All Our Anger?
Well, really the sense of, wow, like what can I do to make sure this never happens in our country?
Right.
And that's a big thing, right? To be able to say that, words to that extent. Also to really look in the mirror and say, what am I doing to either hinder this or to accelerate it? I think one thing the readers can do to hinder the story from happening, is to really ask some tough questions of themselves, like, am I listening?
Right.
Am I agreeing to disagree? Those are two big things. We seem to have lost the art of agreeing to disagree with one another.
Right.
I have it in my own family, with my circle of friends, so on and so forth. I think we all do. And if we say, well, I'm no longer going to associate with so-and-so because they're a blank and I'm a blank, that's dangerous.
It is dangerous.
At a micro level, that adds to this macro picture that could unfold in the future.
Well, and I think the other thing it does is it insulates you so that you begin to only listen to just whatever you already believe.
You're living in an echo chamber.
Right. And that idea is very scary.
Yeah, exactly. And so, and then the other thing really would be, because I think the story is so powerful, would be to tell others about it and challenge them to read it. When I was finishing up writing the last chapter, it was about a year and a half ago. It was right around when the movie Civil War came out. I don't know if you saw the movie Civil War. Did you see the movie?
No.
Okay, you can watch it on Amazon. So The movie Civil War came out in the spring of 2024, and it offered up a scenario of a far right-wing takeover of the government. And so there was this war that started, the Civil War, Second Civil War. And I knew it was coming out because it made a small splash in the news just before its release. I said, well, there's no way I'm going to go see this movie until I'm actually done with the last words of the book, because I don't want to be
too influenced by what you see. Yeah.
So I was done. I went and saw it. The movie was very disturbing. There were a couple of things that it felt like the director really some disturbing things that it seemed like he was implying an assassination of the president, who looked not exactly like a current president, but he had a wild hair thing going on. We'll just say that, right? So there was that nuance. There's a scene there where an unarmed blonde woman who was the press secretary is shot in cold blood by soldiers, inside the White House. That was disturbing. So I think for readers, I think it would be interesting to watch that movie, which has this far left or far right take, and then read my novel,
which is the far left,
far left takeover, and then just really analyze. Okay, what are some things that stick out? And then again, it's at the reader's own individual level with their sphere of influence with family and friends, whatnot. Just make some changes that can help the overall temperature to be lowered in the country, because it's pretty high right now.
It is. It's a little scary. So, William, what's next for you? What are you writing now?
I'm not writing anything right now. I'm actively involved in trying to promote this story and get it out there.
Yeah.
I think it is a very important story to get out. I have some things, in my mind as far as what's next, but it's nothing that
you've started on.
Nothing that I've started on with the first word. So they're there.
I know that I can't imagine being a writer and not having something that's kind of floating around there. That's, so you're writing in your brain right now. It just hasn't started out on the paper yet.
Right.
So, hey guys, if you want to keep this conversation going, head on over to Novels and Latte Book Club on Facebook. There you'll have a chance to win a digital copy of The Sum of All Our Anger. So just look for that post, comment about what you liked or learned from this podcast, and you'll have a chance to win a copy. So, William, if people wanted to get in touch with you, they wanted to talk to you about your writing, about your book, about things maybe that they could do to lower the temperature in the United States right now, how do they reach out to you?
Yeah, so author WilliamRDouglas.com is my website portal, which has links to both my novels and as well as my social media links. They can also leave comments or email me directly if they have a question. I'd be happy to hear from people. So
fantastic. And I'll have all of those links in the show notes. So just take a look there and you can click straight through. Yeah. William, thank you so much for being with me today. This was a great book. I really do recommend, guys, go out and read it. It's a book that will, regardless of where you stand politically, I think it will jar you a little bit to see worst case scenario of where we could be headed should someone get in power who is very much on an edge instead of very much in the center. So thank you, William.
Thank you again, Terry, for the opportunity. It's been a fun conversation.
It has been. Thanks.
Thank you for listening to Online for Authors, where I, Terry M. Brown, author of character-driven fiction and host of the podcast, introduce readers to characters they'd love to invite to lunch. Tune in next Tuesday for another podcast episode.